Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there. And of course, this podcast goes out on YouTube on my second channel at 2 minutes to midnight every Friday UK time, and also on the podcasting platforms, predominantly Spotify, but then it kind of gets fed out via RSS to all the other ones, as far as I know. And indeed, speaking of Spotify, this afternoon I, rather than working on the stuff that I'm supposed to have been working on here in the studio, I've actually been listening to some Fanny. Yes, that's right. So if you're not familiar with Fanny, the 1960s, 1970s all-girl rock band, rocky bluesy type band, I would highly recommend that you go and check them out. I'm having a bit of an Alan Partridge moment here, aren't I? Even more so than usual. There's a video of their cover of Hey Bulldog, the Beatles song, of course, on YouTube, which you can go and check out. And that was kind of what introduced me to them. But there is actually a live album of this whole performance on Spotify that you can listen to. It's on regular rotation in kind of my world, and I was reminded of its existence earlier today by a chap called Dave over on my Discord server. So thank you ever so much to Dave for reminding me about that and brightening up my afternoon and completely ruining my work ethic for today. Speaking of which, there's actually nobody else in the building today. I'm kind of in this office building. I've got this downstairs kind of meeting room attached to an office. And I noticed that the door into the main office is actually locked and there's a parcel kind of propped up against it. The weather's nice and hot and sunny at the moment, but if it's still there when I leave this evening, I will, of course, pop it inside because it's supposed to be stormy and rainy tonight. But yeah, I'm all alone in the building listening to Fanny. What a glorious afternoon. Anyway, I suppose we should get on with some retro news, I guess. And I'm just going to go straight in with this first story because this has been the kind of the big news this week in the retro world to do with DJ Slope. And he is, I consider him to be a friend of mine. He's been a big supporter of the channel since the very early days. And he's genuinely a bloody lovely chap in real life. And he's helped me out with some videos and stuff as well over the years. So it was very sad to see this week that he lost access to his Google account. Well, I say lost access to it. It was suspended for violations of YouTube or Google's terms of service. Sorry. And of course, that's a huge problem when you're a YouTuber because his YouTube account is linked to his Google account, as they are for all of us. And, there's a lot of people that have come out of the woodwork saying, oh, well, you shouldn't upload dodgy stuff to your personal Google account. And, you should use a separate account for you. It's so easy to say all of this stuff in hindsight. You don't think. And it's really got me thinking as well about how I should kind of structure stuff. But anyway, that's by the by. So essentially what happened, and he does have access to his channel once more, what happened was that he has been covering the Super Saga scandal. So he put out this really comprehensive 2-hour-long video a couple of months ago just covering the entire thing in great detail. This is this FPGA-based console that was created by a group of scammers. There's no other way to put it, really. Nothing kind of of any kind of material, nothing of any kind of substance has materialized as a result of this campaign of theirs to create this console. So it's an FPGA-based console that apparently is supposed to run all of the Sega games going back to the Master System all the way up to the Dreamcast, and it caused quite a stir when it was first announced, but they've just had misstep after misstep. They've taken money from people. The guy showed up in a Lamborghini at one point, flashing his cash, and showed off this incredibly dubious so-called prototype, which pretty much everyone in the electronics world took one look at and said, no, there's absolutely no way that can ever work. What on earth are you doing? Although he claimed in the video that it was actually plugged in and working. You're probably familiar with the whole story. And Slope has this series called Kick Scammers, where he really goes behind the scenes. And he goes into great depth covering these stories and kind of infiltrates the communities behind them and gets kind of first-hand evidence and stuff. And that was how he ended up getting his Google account suspended. Because he joined a WhatsApp group for their new project. The previous project basically completely fell apart. They were threatened to be sued by Sega. Of course, there's the whole scandal around the whole thing, and taking money from people and people not getting the refunds they were promised and all that kind of stuff. And they decided that the best way forward was to basically just do the exact same thing, all over again, and hope that people would fall for it again and give them even more money. So there you go. And they created a WhatsApp group for people who were interested in this. And he actually he bought a pay-as-you-go SIM card for a spare phone that he had, and joined this group undercover, and was gathering evidence, collecting people's messages and images and media and stuff that they'd uploaded, and basically dumped the entire chat. Now, the chat was in Spanish, and he doesn't speak Spanish. So he downloaded it all to basically forward it to a translator, and then all of a sudden his Google account was suspended. And the reason for that was because there was apparently some quite nasty material in there. So some kind of quite violent political stuff, stuff like that. Not just inciting violence and kind of extreme politics and that kind of thing, which is apparently against Google's terms of service, and so they suspended his account. Fortunately, he did have a second Google account associated with his YouTube account, which was basically just a kind of a very basic manager, which allowed him to upload a video. Putting the word out, and evidently the word did get out to the right people at Google, and they have now reviewed it again and actually decided to reinstate it this time. Which is great to see, because Slope has been making YouTube videos for years and years now, and as I say, a big part of what he does is this investigative journalism stuff. So, very cool to see that he does have his account back. He's got his YouTube channel back, because apparently a YouTube channel, if it is associated with a suspended or otherwise deleted Google account, apparently they get deleted like 2 years later, just automatically. So he would have lost years and years worth of work. And of course, it's his full-time job, and he wouldn't have been receiving the ad revenue from his videos. And all in all, a bit of a terrible situation. So great to see that did get resolved. Of course, that's the big thing that everyone has been talking about this week. And like I say, he's a nice chap and very supportive of the community. So good to see that this one was a happy, positive resolution. So on that note, let's try to carry that positivity forwards with the rest of this week's Ramble. And I suppose while we are talking about YouTubers, I'll just shove this one in there very, very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time navel-gazing, back-rubbing, brown-nosing, name-dropping bigger channels. But this is another story that's come up this week, and it is a channel that I have been following and that I've been a big fan of for a very, very long time now. And turns out that Suze over on my Discord server also posted a link to this in the Ramble submissions channel. So thank you ever so much to Suze for posting this. As always, of course, the link to join the Discord is down in the description if you want to get involved in that conversation. But this is a channel called Look Mum No Computer, which you're probably familiar with, as he has, 680,000 subscribers as at the time of recording. And he's a guy called Sam Battle, who builds all sorts of interesting contraptions. He's from a music background, and he has his own kind of punk show that he does using like modular synthesizers and stuff like that he actually builds himself from scratch. Incredibly smart guy when it comes to electronics and audio engineering stuff and stuff like that. And of course he covers a lot of kind of retro computing stuff as well. He's also recently bought I can't remember what car it was. It was like an Austin something, like a 1920s car that he's been driving around. But yeah, he's also opened a museum which is full of old, computers stuff and telecommunications stuff, music stuff. He transplanted a pipe organ that was in somebody's house into his museum and made it all Arduino. I mean, the guy's done so much cool stuff over the years. He's a real inspiration, and it works ridiculously hard on his channel. He's constantly doing something. And I guess it was only a matter of time before he came out with a game as well. So he is making this game, which of course is kind of on brand for him, as it has this whole kind of modular synth theme to it. Although the actual kind of core gameplay, by the looks of the announcement video, is like a kind of an arcade shooter, like a twin stick type shooter type thing, which I guess would be definitely of interest to me. It does look like a lot of fun. Love the style of this. Love the absolute madness of this. It's very much in keeping with his kind of way of doing things. And it's there is a demo available now. I haven't had a chance to play it. I know that's a bit of a recurring theme here on Reese Rambles, but I'm going to recommend a game that I haven't actually got around to playing yet. And you can also add it to your wish list on Steam if you want to buy it later on in the year when it is eventually released. So the name of the game is Look Mum No Computer. Well, fairly self-explanatory, I should think. It is the name of his channel. I've just spotted here it's similar to games that I've played. The Atari 50 collection and Broforce. God, remember Broforce? 10 years ago now. That was a cool game. I did enjoy Broforce. Anyway, so you can download the demo. It is available for Windows, for Mac OS, and for Linux as well. And it's planned to be released later on this year. Looks like a load of fun, and as I would expect from Sam, it's going to be absolute madness. Some electronics repair themed stuff in here as well, if you want to go inside electronic devices and zap evil capacitors and that kind of thing. So I think, very much in our wheelhouse, in our ballpark here at Reese Ramble. So, I just want to wish him all the best of luck with this venture. I'm sure it's going to be absolute madness and very good. If you've been following these rambles for any length of time, you will no doubt be aware that I am a huge fan of Argonaut Games' 1997 3D platformer Croc. Also released on the PlayStation, but to me, it's always been a PC game, and I think it is one of those kind of oddballs that is kind of predominantly remembered as a PC game, despite the fact that it was also released on the PlayStation. I could be wrong there. It could just be my own personal experience, but hey, we'll go with it. And of course, the reason I've been reporting on it recently is because Argonaut Games has reformed. Now, this doesn't have any connection to the original Argonaut, of course, a British company that were around in the 90s. But it does have the endorsement of the original owners. Hey, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. And they released this remastered version of Croc from 1997, and it was actually very, very well received. They've added new and improved controls, support for widescreen resolutions, and there's this Crocipedia thing that they've included that has loads of historical kind of development footage and stuff, working with the original creators of the game. And it seems that sales have actually gone pretty well. I haven't actually played it yet, despite the fact that I was ranting and raving about it for the longest time. I haven't even bought it and played it yet. So, hey, just in the interest of transparency. But there's another game. There's another Croc game coming out in the very near future. They are forging ahead based on the success of that particular remaster with another remaster, another new and improved release of one of the games in the Croc series. And this, as reported on TimeExtension.com, is the Game Boy Color game, which was apparently released in 2000, 25 years ago. So, Croc's Game Boy Color debut is getting a re-release to celebrate its 25th birthday, as reported here over on TimeExtension.com. And there we go. There's a photo here of Croc's lead designer, Anna Lark, pictured with the game around the time of its launch in 2000. And look, $24.99 that was on the shelf for. Got some other games here. What's this? We've got, I'm not all that familiar with the Game Boy Color library, but I can certainly see Pokemon up there. The original Pokemon release for $24.99 as well. Oh, Perfect Dark on the Game Boy Color, $29.99. Anyway, some is that R-Type I can just see in the corner. Some absolute classics on the Game Boy, as you know, they're one of my favourite platforms anyway. But anyway, yes, Argonaut has announced plans to re-release the Game Boy Color version of Croc to mark the game's 25th anniversary. Released in North America on the 6th of June 2000, the European release wouldn't come until December the 1st. Croc was a collaboration between Argonaut and fellow British studio Virtuecraft. It's based on the 1997 original, but the gameplay has been adapted to suit the 2D nature of Nintendo's handheld. Argonaut says it will release the game as a physical cartridge as well as digitally in modern formats. So that's very cool to see. Now, just before we go ahead with this story, I haven't actually seen this game in motion, so I went looking on YouTube to see what it looked like, and I found this very cool review by a channel called Square-Eyed Jack 7 years ago. So I will link to this down in the description if you want to check out this review. It's quite an entertaining review in its own right, but as you can see, it's a Game Boy style platformer, as you might expect. I actually quite like the look of this. I'm going to have to give this a go, or at least add it to the list of many, many games that I've talked about in these rambles that I haven't got around to playing. Where is my FPGA Game Boy thing? It's around somewhere. I guess I could play it on Mister. Anyway, so that's what it looks like. Very kind of Mario Sonic, Jazz Jack Rabbit type vibes, I guess. Of course, bearing in mind that this is the Game Boy Color, so within the limitations of that platform. But it looks like a very kind of comprehensive game, as you might expect. So that is that. Anyway, what are they doing about this remaster? Let's go back to time extension. So the story concludes, this won't be a straight republication of the original ROM, however. Argonaut says several quality of life improvements are planned, including better controls, the ability to save without using passwords, and more. Croc's Game Boy Color adventure was followed by a 2001 sequel based on the 1999 home console game. This was developed by Natsumi Co. Limited and published by THQ. So there we go. Let's just go back to this review by Square-Eyed Jack and have a look at a bit more of this footage. But yeah, that's really cool. So I think that's quite unusual for a Game Boy re-release. It's quite unusual for them to actually kind of revisit the controls and quality of life type stuff. Of course, there was the Shantae game quite recently. Well, I say quite recently. It was a couple of years ago now, wasn't it? Which I think MVG was involved with as well, wasn't he? Which was kind of a Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color thing. I remember playing through that on a trip to France. In fact, I actually played it on my journey under the Channel Tunnel at the time. Not that that's relevant at all to this story, but yeah, always cool to see the Game Boy Color getting some love. Of course, it's a console that's, I think, had a bit of a revived interest with kind of modern screen upgrades, these FPGA things like the Analog Pocket and stuff like that. And it's great to see because anything Game Boy is generally great, in my opinion. So cool to see another Croc game coming out, another thing for me to report on and eventually not play when it's released. Back in the summer of last year, I appeared at a show, at an event called Kickstart, which was themed around the Amiga, of course, and of course, quite famously, I'm not an Amiga guy. You're probably familiar with this story. There is actually a video, a vlog-type video, about my trip to that show on this channel, if you want to go and check that out. But yeah, I had a table of Atari stuff set up. Not just the ST, although of course the ST had to make an appearance deep in enemy territory among the Amiga fans. But of course, I had my Atari 800. I had Lynx. I had. Did I take my Jag? I don't think I took the Jag in the end. But yeah, I had some historically interesting stuff, the 5200, stuff like that. And one of the most popular games over the course of that weekend was Boulder Dash on the Atari 800. I had quite a few people come up and play that. And a couple of people actually, because I had a flash cart in it, a couple of people actually changed the game that was running to play Boulder Dash. Which just goes to show what a kind of classic and well-known and well-recognised game it is, I guess even outside of the Atari community. So I reported towards the end of last year that there was going to be a 40th anniversary re-release, a reimagining, a remake of Boulder Dash, of course a game that has appeared on many, many platforms over the years, pretty much all of the 8-bit platforms, and indeed the 16-bit platforms in one form or another. And yeah, it's its 40th anniversary. And the date is rapidly approaching, apparently. So thank you to Nemo for posting this story on my Discord server, because this is an article over on retronews.com, and it's an interview with the people who are actually working on the 40th anniversary edition of the game, talking about their love for the game and kind of the development process behind it. So really interesting read, this. And of course, I'm not going to read the entire article to you now. It will be linked in the usual places, as you might expect. But we'll just take a quick look at this. So, yeah, the headline here is celebrating 40 years of Boulder Dash with the creators of its latest entry. And this is at retronews.com, as mentioned. The title of the game is Boulder Dash 40th Anniversary. And it says here, in November 2024, we brought you the news that the Boulder Dash series will be celebrating its 40th year with a brand new title. The new game, titled Boulder Dash 40th Anniversary, is due for release on Steam, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation and the App Store on the 24th of July 2025. In the meantime, the Retro News team had a chat with two of the game's creators to look behind the scenes of this upcoming arcade adventure romp that looks set to be one of the best Boulder Dash games yet. There is a trailer here, so I will just set this in motion so we can have a look at that for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. And the first thing that kind of strikes me about this is that, of course, it has this kind of modern mobile game kind of feel to it. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, as long as they resist the urge to stuff it full of microtransactions and, currency stuff like they usually do with these mobile games. But the fact that it is being released on so many different platforms, because it's being released on the PC, the Xbox, and the PlayStation as well, kind of implies to me that they won't. And this is just going to be kind of a straight up remake. Hoping for the best here. But yeah, it says here, most of our readers will be familiar with the Boulder Dash series, but for anyone not in the know, it started life as an Atari 8-bit computer game released in 1984. Good year, that. It went on to be one of the most influential series in gaming history and was ported to just about every console and computer under the sun in some form or another. Pretty sure that's what I just said. Since then, it has spawned a myriad of sequels and spin-offs, as well as seeing several design changes to its quintessential star, Rockford. One of the standout features of the series has always been great presentation, and with this latest entry, developer BBG Entertainment has brought in the best and brightest to make sure the visuals and soundtrack keep to this tradition. For the soundtrack, veteran composer Chris Hulsbeck has gotten on board, huge name, and we ask him what it means to him to be involved in celebrating Boulder Dash's 40th year. Now, as mentioned, it's an interview. It's quite in-depth. Talks to a couple of the people on the team, and also there's some good information here about the game itself, about the remake. I just realised this is from Faith Johnson. I've been following Faith for a very long time across various social media. Very good stuff. In fact, she has a YouTube channel as well. Retro Faith, is that right? I think that might be right. Anyway. There you go, another good reason to go and check out this article. So, yeah, of course, they've got Chris Hulsbeck on board, which is fantastic. Really, well-known and well-respected name in the world of video game music. And, yeah, just some kind of background information about this upcoming remake, which is very much upon us. It's going to be released in around a month's time, towards the end of July. So thank you to Nemo for reminding me that this is very much going to be a thing. Go check it out. The links are in the description, in the usual places. Nice little bit of reading. Another Atari story for you now, and this one comes via Technic. That's right, Technic of Technic Corner fame. Unfortunately, there is no Technic Corner this week, but I did want to cover this story because this one is very relevant to my interests, being all about the Atari 2600, one of my favourite subjects. And yeah, this is this ChatGPT chess thing. So he's linked to the story over on theregister.com. Of course, that old stalwart of IT reporting. And the headline here is, Chap claims Atari 2600 absolutely wrecked ChatGPT at chess. The 1.19 MHz 8-bit CPU trounced modern GPUs. Can you do better with your retro tech? The Atari 2600 gaming console, Simon Sharwood continues, came into the world in 1977 with an 8-bit processor that ran at 1.19 MHz and just 128 bytes of RAM. That's bytes, 128 bytes of RAM. But that's apparently enough power to beat ChatGPT at chess. So says infrastructure architect Robert Caruso, who over the weekend posted the results of an experiment he conducted to pit ChatGPT against the Atari 2600's chess engine via the Stellar emulator and see what happens. So I just want to share an interesting story about Atari, about the Atari 2600 and chess, of course. If you're a bit of an aficionado, you probably know what's coming, but I think this is interesting. So when the Atari VCS, as of course it was originally known, way back in 1977 when it was originally released, and I don't think this story actually covers this, which is a shame. So I'm going to share it with you now. When that console was first released back in 1977, Atari, of course, when they designed the box, wanted to show off its capabilities and show off the wide range of kind of potential gaming experiences that an owner of the VCS might have with that console. So they picked a load of kind of random images that they thought were representative of kind of the sorts of games that were going to be coming out on the system. And you see here, this is the original box, and about kind of 3/4 of the way across, I don't think you can see my mouse cursor here, I don't have that enabled, but about 3/4 of the way across on the very top row here, there is a picture of a chess piece. And you can see this is the original Heavy Sixer version of the VCS, of course the video computer system, which you can spot the VCS because it's got the thick rounded bottom. And you can't beat a thick rounded bottom. But yeah, we've got stuff on here like there's a roulette wheel, there's a motorbike, there's somebody throwing some dice. Of course, when the box was first designed, there weren't really that many games available for the console, so they only had a very limited number of screenshots to go with. We've got some cars here representing motor racing, of course. We've got someone playing tennis. And on this top row was this chess piece, and apparently somebody actually bought the Atari video computer system back in 1977, entirely based upon this image of this knight from chess, thinking that he'd be able to play chess on this console. And Atari didn't actually release a chess game for it initially, and he actually sued them successfully because basically they were advertising the fact that you could play chess against this console, and you couldn't at the time. And they actually changed the design of the box, and they changed this image of this chess piece for something else. You're going to ask me what it was, and I can't remember. My box isn't around here. I don't know. Anyway, they changed the picture of the chess piece for something else, and that means that this very early kind of first run of these VCS boxes is incredibly rare, and the chess piece boxes are very, very collectible, over and above, of course, the collectability of the original Heavy Sixer. So there you go. That's a cool Atari fact for you. And a bit of a diversion. Anyway, so getting back to the story, Caruso decided to run the experiment after conversing with ChatGPT about the history of chess. At some point in that chat, the bot volunteered to play chess against the Atari. A reasonable suggestion, as video chess was one of the games Atari commissioned for its console. So, online chat in which chess wonks discuss the merits of video chess suggest it may have played at a level beginners may have found challenging, and perhaps gave regular recreational players of intermediate skill a little to worry about. Caruso thought his experiment would be a light-hearted stroll down retro memory lane. Instead, he watched as the Atari humiliated ChatGPT. ChatGPT got absolutely wrecked on the beginner level. He wrote, despite being given a baseline board layout to identify pieces, ChatGPT confused rooks for bishops, missed pawn forks, and repeatedly lost track of where pieces were. Caruso said ChatGPT blamed the icons Atari Chess uses as too abstract to recognise, but even after changing to standard chess notation, the chatbot made enough blunders to get laughed out of a third-grade chess club. For 90 minutes, I had to stop it from making awful moves and correct its board awareness multiple times per turn. He wrote, the chatbot kept promising it would improve if we just started over. Eventually, the bot conceded the game. Have you played Atari today? Caruso asked, invoking the company's advertising slogan, ChatGPT wishes it hadn't. So, now, of course, I haven't really talked much about AI stuff and my thoughts on it. And by AI, of course, I mean LLM stuff, large language model. It's not something I really cover at all on my channel. I don't really use these things. I actually have a ChatGPT account, and I have kind of used it for bits and pieces of code in my day job and stuff like that. And I have kind of prompted it for ideas and stuff in the past, but it's very much not a part of my kind of general workflow. I know people who live their entire lives by it, think it's the gospel, and don't seem to understand its limitations. The fact that it's just essentially a system that cobbles words together into convincing-looking sentences. But I will say, I do feel it's my duty to kind of stay on top of it and at least keep my what's the figure of speech I'm looking for? Anyway, at least kind of dabble with it and at least be aware of what it's about and about its capabilities and stuff. As it's probably going to take my job at some point. I've seen the kind of code that it can produce and it works. It's kind of the long and short of it. But don't use it for my channel. I'm kind of very actively put off by people who use, AI thumbnails and stuff on their channels. But anyway, this isn't a story about my thoughts on ChatGPT. This is a story about it being beaten at chess. But of course, this isn't, this isn't something that's been specifically trained to play chess. It's just a thing that, cobbles words together. And the fact that it's familiar with the concept of chess and at least came up with some valid moves and stuff is probably at least noteworthy to some extent. But for now, the Atari 2600, more powerful than we could have possibly imagined. I mean, I could have told you that. And that, my dear Rambler, brings us around quite neatly to my regular Video of the Week feature, wherein I feature a video that I have seen in the past week here on the old YouTubes that has inspired or entertained or enlightened or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Quite often they are retro tech, retro computing and retro gaming related, and quite often they aren't. Sometimes I have more than one video for you if I've been watching far too much YouTube. although that is generally the case. Quite often I just have the one. And this week's is an interesting exception, actually, because this is one that was actually recommended to me by Crafton over on my Discord server. So thank you ever so much. And it's noteworthy because Crafton is a first-time submitter. So, this is absolutely brilliant. This isn't one that had come up on my radar. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. So without further ado, let's have a look at this. Now, one thing I will say, I'm not quite sure. Hopefully, this will be viewable to my followers outside of the UK, because this is on an official BBC YouTube channel. So this is BBC Archive. Do let me know if you can't see this, and then I'll make a note to offer an alternative for international viewers. This would be a great place for a VPN sponsorship spot, wouldn't it? Yeah, but I don't do that. Anyway, this is a program from 1984, the year that I was born. A bit of a theme for this week's Ramble, actually. And it's a TV show that was on in time for Christmas 1984 on BBC Two, which was called Commercial Breaks. And as you can see here, the title of the show was The Battle for Santa's Software. Yeah, great title there, BBC. Quite a different institution back in the early 80s. But anyway, the description here: the market for home computer games in the UK has grown at an extraordinary rate. This Christmas, British shoppers are expected to spend over £30 million on games. It's a market worth fighting for, but as more and more companies release more and more games each year, it's an extremely competitive one. Commercial Breaks follows two British software companies, Imagine Software and Ocean Software. I'm sure you've probably heard of both of those, as they seek a Christmas top 10 hit. So, the whiz kids at Imagine are pinning their hopes on what they have dubbed mega games so technically ambitious that they will exceed the computing capabilities of the Spectrum and Commodore. Their latest game, Bandersnatch, will feature so much complex animation that it will need to be packaged with a hardware add-on and sold at a premium price, over 4 times more than average. It's a risky approach, and it's causing headaches for Imagine's artists, programmers and sales team, but the company are hoping it will make Bandersnatch stand out against the competition. Of course, also famously inspired that interactive Black Mirror thing a couple of years ago, which was very, very cool. I think Netflix recently took that down, unfortunately, so I can't recommend that you go and check that out. And of course, they're also that's Imagine Software. They're also covering Ocean in this particular episode. They're returning to a game that sold well for them last year, Hunchback. Again, another game that I'm sure you're probably familiar with. And creating a sequel, Hunchback 2, Quasimodo's Revenge. Which company's strategy will pay off? Will Bandersnatch or Hunchback 2 top the game's charts? And that's essentially what this program's about. So it's a full-blown BBC TV program, the full half an hour's worth, or 28 minutes and 56 seconds worth here. And it's such a fascinating insight into how these kind of early 80s, early mid-80s development houses worked. Of course, Ocean and Imagine, two of the biggest names in game development at the time, still much loved and recognised today as well around the world. And some great Spectrum and Commodore 64 footage in this particular show. So well worth a sit down and a proper watch on the big telly, I would say. It's a real slice of history and a really brilliant thing from the BBC Archive, as I have come to expect. I am a subscriber of theirs, and usually their stuff comes up on my YouTube homepage, but for some reason YouTube deemed this one not worthy of my attention. So big thanks for posting this over on the Discord. But go give it a watch. This is my video of the week, 1984, Bandersnatch, Bailiffs and the Battle for a Hit Game. This is from, as mentioned, BBC Two show Commercial Breaks from Christmas 1984. Excellent viewing, this. Brilliant stuff. And great that the BBC are uploading this stuff and making it freely available on YouTube for everyone to enjoy. Right, as I don't have a main channel release to finish on, as I usually would in these rambles this week, and I am working on it, I promise. I know I say this every week. You'll probably notice there's nothing next to me on the desk either, because I didn't want to spoil what I'm working on at the moment. It's really cool. It's actually turned into a bit of a rabbit hole, but hopefully that will be along shortly. But so as not to leave you empty-handed as we part ways, I thought I'd talk about a couple of smaller bits and bobs, some odds and ends that have kind of come across my desk in the past week that I thought might be of interest to you. And of course, they will be linked in the usual places if you want to go and check these out. And Yeah, let's just dive in. So the first one is a video from one of my favourite channels called Matt KC, although this is his second channel, Matt KC Bites. Thank you to Vanessa for sending this my way. By the way, Vanessa's been a big supporter of the channel for a very, very long time now, and a good friend of mine as well. So, yeah, thank you for this. I love everything that Matt Casey does. He does a lot of stuff with the original Xbox. He was responsible for that Lego Island reverse engineering project I talked about quite recently. Of course, he's obsessed with that game. Insanely talented developer, and yeah, a bit of a madman, bit of a lunatic. Some of the projects that he gets involved with, I think it's fair to say, including this project to. But I mean, he kind of framed it as porting thousands of modern applications to Windows 95. But essentially what he did was he ported the .NET framework to Windows 95, so you could run lots of modern software on that operating system, that 30-year-old operating system. So that's probably one of the things that he's best known for. And he has also talked about some other recent projects to port some modern software to these old operating systems. And this video is specifically about Discord and more. So yeah, it's a 15-minute long video, and in it he talks about Discord Messenger and AeroChat, which are two kind of Discord and kind of chat type efforts for these old operating systems. Well worth going and checking out this video, just seeing the story behind these. So thank you for that. The next is another story from Technic, and this is something I've kind of, this is something that really fascinates me, this whole concept, and something I've talked about a bit in these rambles before. A story over on fastcompany.com, and it's about Gen Z, or Gen Z. I've always said Gen Z, you know, it's an American concept. Let's let them have that. And it's about how they are bringing back the BlackBerry, apparently, if you remember those smartphones from the kind of early 2000s, kind of mid-2000s. And yeah, it's about how the kids, all the hip kids nowadays, are bringing back this old technology and embracing the analog way of life. And apparently that also now includes the BlackBerry and BlackBerry Messenger. And it's a little bit of a story about that. It's something I've kind of talked about previously before, so don't really have any further thoughts on this. Just thought it was an interesting little story. I never had a BlackBerry. I do know a few people who had them. Sorry, I'm just playing with my camera remote here. I do know a few people that had them, but never really got into it. Kind of more of a corporate thing, and I was still a bit of a young student, I guess, at the time. And yeah, not not something I ever got into, and kind of fizzled out before before I had a chance to have a play with it. But of course, I acknowledge that it was a huge thing in the corporate world. Yeah, kind of a weird story of how it all kind of fizzled out and just got massively overtaken by the iPhone and Android. Which is a real shame, because they were cool little phones with hardware, keyboards, and all the rest of it. But yes, Gen Z, in their ever ongoing efforts to take us back to the good old days before social media and all of that, are embracing text messaging and phone calls, and these older phones that don't run the modern apps. I can't say I blame them. And finally, the last thing that I suppose I need to acknowledge this week is Perifractic. He is talking about buying Commodore. So, yeah. Now, I'm not a Commodore expert, I will say. I am, of course, in the Atari camp. I am familiar with Perifractic's work, of course. He's a British YouTuber who lives over in LA. He was in Star Wars, don't you know? I'm not sure if he's ever mentioned that. And, he wants to try to buy Commodore, and apparently it's an option, as revealed at the end of this very, very long video. It is an interesting video, I must say. Just talk about the history of the kind of the brand and the rights, and who's kind of owned it over the years. But at the end of the video, he does actually have some contact from the current owners of the brand, and it turns out they might actually be interested in selling it to him. There has been some debate as to the actual value of this and about his motivations and stuff. To be honest, I'm not going to get involved in that whole discussion. It's just an interesting thing, isn't it? Perifractic, a YouTuber, owning Commodore. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how that one unfolds. But that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble, so thank you ever so much for joining me. I'm off now to contact the current owners of Atari, see if they're going to put it up for sale. I probably couldn't afford it if they could. But have a wonderful weekend. Of course, we've got those storm warnings in place here in the UK later on today. This building, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the Ramble, if I end up using that take, I can't remember. That was a long time ago. But yeah, someone has left a parcel outside, so I need to go and check that that's okay, because there's nobody else in the building at the moment. And if it isn't, I will pop it inside for them so it doesn't get wet. And that'll be my good deed for the day, as well as recording this, I guess. Anyway, I'm waffling now. Thank you ever so much. I shall see you same time, same place next week. Bye.